Hello, F1 fans. Welcome back to the F1 Masters podcast brought to you by AUBG Daily. As usual, you're with myself, David, Vasco, and Hari. And in this episode, we are going to be talking about one of the biggest what-ifs in F1 history. This will potentially become a series. So today is part one. And today we're going to be discussing one of the most famous incidents in F1 history and how, if it didn't happen, history could have changed. And we will be talking about what if Ayrton Senna survived the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix. So yeah, big topic with, I think, a lot of consequences in the future if Senna survives this incident. So yeah, Vasco, do you want to start?
Well, first of all, we have two options, but I want to discuss something pretty quick before that. And I think the safety regulations in F1 would have been a lot different, and I think for the worse. Sadly, such a big event should happen, something so groundbreaking should happen so that the officials in the sport understand that there is need for change and there is need for better safety. And we have seen it on a couple of occasions in the future. After that, we saw sadly the cases of Jules Bianchi. We also saw some cases that ended with happy ending, for example, Romain Grosjean. But I'm just sad that such tragedies should happen for F1 to understand that this is probably one of the most dangerous sports in the world, and everything should be very strict when it comes to safety of the drivers.
Yeah, I wanted to also add that the previous day Roland Ratzenberger also died, so it was a very dark weekend. And in terms of safety regulations, because if this doesn't happen, maybe you would think then the FIA would not implement additional safety regulations, which potentially could be the case. But since Roland Ratzenberger died the day before, I think there would have been improved safety regulations regardless if Senna survived or did not survive this incident.
Yeah, I agree, but maybe the extent of improvements would be different because we're talking about Senna. This is one of the most legendary Formula 1 drivers of all time. His legacy is incredible. So this is what influenced FIA to take decisions.
And now I think we can move on to very, very interesting topic, and this is alternative history. If Senna survived, we have gathered two options. The first one, and the most immediate, of course, is Senna wins the 1994 Drivers' Championship. And the second option is Senna doesn't win the 1994 Drivers' Championship. And there are a lot of things that can happen from both options. But let's discuss what if Senna wins the 1994 Drivers' Championship, because in the end, Benetton with Michael Schumacher behind the wheel wins it, 92 points, compared to Hill and Williams with 91. And I think if Senna was in the cockpit of the Williams, despite the poor start of the season, I think he would have won it. And that would have made, I think, a very big difference in the future of F1 after 94. Because after that, the 95 season was relatively dominant for Schumacher and Benetton. But again, in 96, Williams were pretty strong. And even discussing the basis of it, I think 36-year-old, 36, right? Yeah, he's born in 1960. 36 years old, Ayrton Senna would have won, I think, 5 titles by 96, which would have cemented his legacy in the GOAT debate.
I agree completely. He would have equaled Fangio with 5 titles, which would be incredible. Schumacher was the next one to do it, but maybe Schumacher wouldn't have as many titles as, you already said. This was going to change history.
And this is probably the less interesting option, because I think if that happens, Senna, he wins in 94. He has a better shot at the title in 95, but I don't think he wins it. And in 96, he would most probably win it with Williams, which means that I think he would have been in the sport till probably 98, 99, probably 2000, 2001, but I don't think he would have taken any more titles with him in that case. And that would mean a pretty steady career, 5 titles, retiring in 98, 99 during the 2 dominant years of McLaren. But what would happen if he didn't win the title in 94 with Williams?
Well, in 1994, Damon Hill was 1 point off Michael Schumacher. I just wanted to say, I personally believe that Senna would win the 94 title, because if Damon Hill is 1 point off of Michael Schumacher, I think Senna in the same car beats him, and he proved that with getting the first 3 pole positions of the season. But if he does not win it, which I think it would be a very fascinating season if he doesn't win it, maybe potentially a 3-way title fight, who knows. But if he doesn't win it, there are a few, not really a few options, there's one main option, and that is Senna goes to Ferrari. There was actually reports that Senna had received an offer to drive for Ferrari in 1995. And you could assume that maybe not happy with Williams after losing the title, could move there. Although I find it hard to believe, actually, because this was Senna's first year with Williams, and he had pushed for this move like a couple years before that, and in fact was supposed to join Williams in 93, but it got delayed because Alain Prost had a clause in his contract where Senna could not be his teammate, and so he joined after Prost retired. But yeah, if he goes to Ferrari in 1995, I think he almost takes the legacy that Schumacher eventually gets, which is to build up Ferrari into a championship winning team. And I think he would achieve that as early as 1997 against Jacques Villeneuve. I think Senna wins that title.
But what would that mean for Schumacher's legacy? Because if he never joined Ferrari in 96, I don't think he would ever join them if Senna is the main pilot there. Because probably, let's say Senna retires in 98, 99, 2000, and after that they pick Schumacher. Or if he decides to leave Benetton, what are his probably 2 main options that he has? Williams and McLaren. And I think McLaren probably at that time didn't sound that appealing, but everybody knows the legacy of McLaren. And I think he would have ended up there and probably even because if he takes the title in 94 and 95, he would have had 2 titles. And with McLaren, he may have taken the titles in 98, 99. And that would mean, 4 titles by 99. But if he never joins Ferrari, this is probably like, this would have been his last title. Or
You don't know, because what if McLaren then develop better than Ferrari because they have Schumacher? Schumacher helped develop Ferrari into what they became in the early 2000s. So if they have Schumacher, maybe they then develop the car better than Ferrari. And McLaren were in the title fight for some of those seasons, like 2000 or 2003. Kimi Raikkonen was actually 2 points off of Schumacher from winning the title. So if Schumacher is in that car, maybe he wins. And also, who would Ferrari have in their driver lineup at that time? Because if you don't have Schumacher, I mean, are you going to win the championship with Rubens Barrichello? I don't think every season for sure. So, and who is the second driver? We don't know. So who would it be actually after if Senna went to Ferrari and retired? Who would be his replacement, you would think?
And also, what about Mika Hakkinen at that time? And also Villeneuve? Probably not. They have 3 titles from like 97, 98, 99. And who would have taken these titles? I think if Hakkinen was not in McLaren, or what, Hakkinen would have been the teammate of Schumacher?
Yeah, also...
How is that going to turn out? Can Senna capitalize on this?
Also, where would David Coulthard go? Because he was in that McLaren and he's no longer in that McLaren. So there are very different options. So I guess maybe to summarize, what would you think is the most likely outcome?
I was also gonna mention that Jacques Villeneuve may not have even joined Formula One, because he was in IndyCar before, and he got the opportunity at Williams. But maybe if Senna was there, he was just not gonna appear in F1. So we would have not had Gilles Villeneuve's son.
And
yeah,
what about the immediate future after that? As we talked, not only what is going to happen with Rubens Barrichello or David Coulthard, but let's say, for example, what was going to happen with Juan Pablo Montoya? Was he going to be, I don't know, in McLaren, or was he going to join another team and probably take a title?
Ferrari.
Also for Kimi Raikkonen, and just a lot of unknowns of
Yeah.
what was going to happen.
Yeah, what Harry mentioned about Jacques Villeneuve, I think, is really important to keep in mind because he won the IndyCar Championship and the Indy 500 in 1995, which won him the seat at Williams. But if Senna and Hill are in that team, I mean, I guess if Hill retires, because Hill is quite an old driver at like when he joined Formula One, he's in his mid-30s. So, and with Senna as his teammate, maybe he gets demotivated by losing to him and he could just retire even earlier than what he did. That's when Jacques Villeneuve potentially could get in. And what about the option of Senna joining Ferrari and Schumacher following him into Ferrari? How likely is this of a possibility? And even if it's not likely, what do we think would have happened?
I think that would have been the greatest lineup that the sport has ever seen. But this is something that I thought in the beginning. That was the dirty era of F1. And we were talking about 94 and having three top-notch drivers in the seats. Hill, Senna, Schumacher. Imagine a three-way battle between the three of them. Then, like, any of them taking the first three positions. Imagine the start. Imagine the dirty game or the mind games before the race. That would have been amazing.
I would imagine that as teammates, like there will be a lot of tension between them because they have big egos, both of them, and I don't know who was gonna win. Like,
do we think we could have been similar to like 2007 Raikkonen versus the McLarens? Although I personally don't think Senna and Hill are really on the same level at all. So I would assume Hill gets beaten fairly comfortably.
Well, we shouldn't underestimate him, but this is Senna and Schumacher we're talking about. So probably as teammates, I don't see the chemistry between them, but I'm sure that every race would have been pure entertainment. And I imagine it more like the battle between Prost and Senna. Something like that, but probably even on a larger scale. Because at first I thought, well, what if it was the young guy, the young upcoming rising star in the face of Schumacher, and 35, 36, 37-year-old Ayrton Senna, and some battle that was looking like, let's say, Alain Prost and Niki Lauda, because they had a lot of mutual respect between them, and even though Lauda won the title when they were teammates only by half a point, they still had a massive respect for each other. But I think that the ego of Schumacher and Senna wouldn't have made that possible. So that is why I think if they were teammates, it was going to be, let's say, if Schumacher beats Senna, let's say 2 seasons in a row, Senna was most probably, I think, going to retire. And if old Senna beats Schumacher 2 seasons in a row, I think we would have never seen the whole legacy of Schumacher in Ferrari. And he would have decided to switch teams, as we talked already. Most probably it was going to be either McLaren or Williams. I think McLaren is much more possible because I don't know, it's just sounds more natural at that time. Or probably Williams and no Villeneuve.
I mean,
Williams.
Williams were like their fall off, like no one could have predicted it. So at the time, I mean, 96, 97, they were comfortably the best car on the grid. So theoretically, you could say that Williams looks like the better option because at that time,
for
McLaren,
the first half of the 90s, of course.
And McLaren really post 91 were getting dominated by Williams, and then Benetton, and even Ferrari were having better cars than McLaren. So McLaren were arguably a midfield car at a certain point.
They had the Peugeot engine, so
They had Peugeot engines, so there's not really anything to attract him to McLaren, I feel like.
I think after a battle with Senna, because Senna, like McLaren remains Senna team, or at least for me, when I associate Senna with a team, this is McLaren. And what better redemption for, let's say, losing to Senna than overtaking what is considered his team and making your own legacy there, and even probably overtaking Senna's legacy. Because if Schumacher was there for 98 and 99 to win the title, and after that winning 1 or 2 more titles with them, he would have probably ended up in the folklore of McLaren as the more successful driver.
The most?
The more successful compared to Senna, if he has 4 titles.
Yeah, but not all 4 of them would be with McLaren.
Well, I'm talking about 1998, 99, and after that probably because this is Schumacher and McLaren they're competitive in the first years of the new millennium. So I think Kimi Raikkonen he was pretty close to Schumacher when he was in Ferrari. So I think if their roles were reversed, I think Schumacher could have won that championship. Yeah, theories.
Yeah, I mean, they also struggle with a lot of reliability. So, I mean, Kimi Raikkonen, if there's like no reliability issues, Kimi Raikkonen wins that championship regardless, probably.
Yeah, okay, but maybe let's go back to the 2 options that we have and just discuss, like, considering Senna's abilities and his, as David said, great start to the season. He had 3 pole positions in the first 3 races. Do we think it was realistic that he wins the 1994 championship?
I think it is, even though he starts the season quite bad. He retires in the first 2 races and then obviously in San Marino. But looking at the pace that Damon Hill showed and Williams as a whole, I mean, Damon Hill had 6 wins, and even Nigel Mansell, who came back from retirement, also won the last race of the season, which is quite impressive. And Williams won the Constructors' Championship, so they, you could say, had the better car than Benetton. Or maybe they had 2 good drivers, whereas Benetton, they were struggling with the likes of Jos Verstappen in their driver lineup. But if Damon Hill is 1 point off of Michael Schumacher, I don't see how Senna does not beat Schumacher, especially considering his experience. I think at the time, probably one of the most, if not the most experienced driver on the grid. Michael Schumacher doesn't know what it's like to fight for a world championship. And I think we see a season similar to, actually, no, I was going to say similar to 2024 maybe, like Lando Norris, who tries to fight for the world championship, but doesn't have that championship pedigree to push him further, if that makes sense. Even though Senna would start off on the back foot since Schumacher won the first 3 races and Senna retired from all of them. Considering Schumacher's disqualifications and his race bans and a lot of controversy with Schumacher throughout the season, and even the Benetton regarding its legality, because there was a lot of controversy about that. I think Senna locks in really and dominates the second half of the season and finds a way to overhaul Schumacher.
I want to see like an alternative history where events turn like that Heinz-Harald Frentzen wins the title. Imagine that Senna survives, and in the near future that leads to Heinz-Harald Frentzen winning the title. You have heard the theory about his like potentially winning the championship.
Yeah, and I mean, he was fairly close in 1999, for example, but 1999 would have been interesting actually, because Michael Schumacher, he breaks his leg in that year, and Eddie Irvine ends up fighting for the title. And you got to think that if either Schumacher or Senna actually drive that full season, they probably beat Mika Häkkinen to the title. Since Eddie Irvine, he finishes 2 points behind Mika Häkkinen, which I feel like is not even talked about enough, probably because that's how much people don't rate Eddie Irvine. But I think Ferrari, they lose a lot of championships in the late 90s to their own faults rather than not having the car to succeed. And I think that was partly due to Schumacher's inexperience. Whereas if Senna's in that car, he could comfortably win 2 or even 3 championships with Ferrari.
Most probably yes, but something that we'll never know what would have happened. But I think if I have to pick one of the 2, despite the second option being much more interesting, I think the first one, Senna wins the 94 title with Williams. He remains in Williams for 95. Schumacher still wins in Benetton in 95. 96, Senna wins his last 5th title with Williams. He remains there for, I don't know, probably 97, 98.
But in 1997, you don't think he wins the championship instead of Jacques Villeneuve?
Yeah, actually, 97, he's still in Williams. He wins 6th title. He becomes the undisputed GOAT of that time. And after that, probably he either he retires in 97 or he remains for 98 and 99 in Williams, but I don't think that he manages to win the title. Then end in 98 or 99, just before the year 2000, he retires from the sport, and he's probably considered the GOAT of F1 by that time. Schumacher, I think, if in that scenario, Schumacher doesn't win 7 titles. And I think that would mean that Lewis Hamilton would be the undisputed GOAT because of the 7 titles, probably.
But Schumacher would still probably go to Ferrari in that timeline because Senna does not affect the Ferrari timeline.
Yeah, but Schumacher then has one less title, probably even... Well, one less title because I don't see Senna being competitive in 98 or 99, but that would mean that Schumacher still breaks his leg and...
Yeah.
And yeah, he's in that alternative universe. Both Senna and Schumacher, they have 6 titles, and Lewis Hamilton has 7.
I like your universe, and I'm gonna agree with option 1. I think that it was more realistic that Senna wins it, and I love it how Hamilton would be the undisputed leader in terms of titles.
In general, I agree that Senna would win, but I think that even if he doesn't win, he still stays at Williams because still very competitive, and he begged to be in this team for multiple years, and I don't think he just gives up after 1 season. To me, this is unrealistic.
But what about 2 seasons? In 95, when the car is even less competitive than the 94 car,
yeah, but then in 96
from Schumacher.
Then in 96, though, who gets the Ferrari seat? Will it be Senna or will it be Schumacher? Because Schumacher, even though he wins both championships, he still decides to move to Ferrari, and his motivation is to get Ferrari back to the top and things like this. And I don't know if Senna had this particular motivation. I mean, since he never even drove for Ferrari throughout his career.
Well, we know the saying that everybody is a Ferrari fan, even if they're not a Ferrari fan. So that is interesting. There are also some other topics like Ross Brown, as we discussed before we started recording, that if Schumacher never went to Ferrari, probably Ross Brown would have never ended up in Ferrari too. So that would have changed. I think that would have changed the legacy of Formula One, because if he never ended up in Ferrari, I think that the history would have turned out that way, that in 2009 he wouldn't have been there. So I don't know, probably no Brown GP, 0 titles from Jenson Button, and probably even alternating the history of the decision of Mercedes to buy Brown, and probably them never being that good, and Lewis Hamilton never going there and never winning 7 titles. That's what makes these alternative theories interesting, that it is like the butterfly effect. Something, and in this case, it is not even that small. Something really big changes, and that is changing the whole history of F1. I don't know, probably if Senna survived, now Fernando Alonso would have had 7 titles, and people would consider him the GOAT. But we'll never know, but we can always speculate.
Yeah, also imagine like a older version of Senna just giving advice to younger generations. This would be incredible to watch. Like, it would be so useful for younger racers.
Well, imagine Felipe Massa. If he knew that Senna was there, something may have been different, and he could have ended up winning the title. Or even if he lost the title, imagine the scenes of Ayrton Senna being 57 at that time, 58. Oh yeah, for 47, yeah. 47, but being that legend with 6 titles, going to Felipe Massa and being like everything would be fine. That would have been in the history of F1. But as we said, a lot of opportunities, and we would never know what would have happened.
Oh, one last question, since Senna already is a 3-time world champion, is argued as the GOAT by quite a few people. Do we think if he has 5 or 6 championships, like, he is undisputed GOAT, even if Lewis Hamilton ends up having more championships than him?
Definitely. I think the aura that Ayrton Senna had till this day is unmatched in Formula One. And even we who have never witnessed him race live, even if we know about him and even if we feel that aura, that special feeling surrounding him, I think with 6 titles, he would have been the undisputed greatest of all time of Formula One.
I will actually agree here. I think the confidence that he expressed through his driving was just incredible.
Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this discussion, first episode of What-Ifs. If you liked it, please let us know. This is all for today from us. We're looking forward to the next episode. Till then, like, subscribe, and follow us in AUBG Daily on Instagram and Facebook, and stay tuned for more of our content. Thank you, and remember,
If you no longer go for a gap that exists,
You're no longer a racing driver.